Okay, I think we're up. Hello, everybody. Just kind of a impromptu discussion. Me and Mathew Steele have been talking for quite a while now. I guess it's been a couple of months on people's ability or people's actual desire to want to know what's true. So we decided that tonight, since we're not really doing anything, we'd throw this together. And Matthew's joining us via my cell phone's speaker because his bandwidth is horrible down there and we can't get it to work any other way. So all you're going to see is my icon all night. Sorry, guys. And the other end of it is because I am, again, incompetent when it comes to playing with these Hangouts. I'm not going to be monitoring the chat. Sorry. But please, if you leave any comments or whatever, especially after this is posted, I'll definitely try to get back with you. And I'm assuming that Mathew might want to mirror this on his channel as well. So we'll both get back with you. Mathew, how you doing? You want to kind of expand on what I was talking about?
Yeah, we're going to be finally having the hangout about something that we've mostly just talked about in private over the last few months. And that is whether or not everyone who is a quote-unquote truth seeker would really want every question answered. One example would be the moment of your death. Well, would you want to know, if you could know all things, or any specific thing, is the moment of your death something that you would want to know? Another is infidelity of a spouse. Would you want to know if they were unfaithful to you? Now, your immediate reaction might be, yes, I want to know, because that has a huge impact on our relationship, but it depends just on who you are. And I think in asking these questions, we can get a better idea of where we're headed in seeking knowledge, because we get accused so frequently by believers of not actually wanting to know if Christianity is true, not wanting to know that there's a God, that sort of thing. So if we can ask ourselves any question and answer it, and seek the answer, no matter how difficult it's going to be or how much it's going to pain us, I think that that helps us get a better job, a better idea of where we really are, just in terms of intellectual honesty.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, me and Mathew do tend to diverge a little bit on this. I'm really starting to be convinced, if not already convinced, that I think everyone has topics in their life that they don't want to know what's real. They don't want to know what's true. And not necessarily they don't want to know, but they don't want to pry into that or investigate those claims in a way that would potentially negatively affect the rest of their lives. I mean, for me, it would be my grandmother. My grandmother was probably, if not the person who taught me empathy and showed me what it means to be good, as far as the way I define good. I don't know who was. She was. I'm not even going to go into how much I would praise her. She's no longer alive. She died a few years ago. But she was definitely the matriarch of the family. She did a wonderful job of, making all of us understand what's right, what's wrong, what it's like, to be empathetic, and how people should act toward one another. So the little, I guess, scenario that I thought up is if someone came to me and said, look, I've got definitive proof in this folder of some things that your grandmother did that if you became aware of, you could no longer look at her as the person that you remember her as. Let's say that, I don't know, something horrific. She was a mass murderer. She was a child. She did, child abuse. I mean, whatever it was. And they threw the folder on the desk. I really don't think I would open that folder. I really don't think I would want to be confronted with that in a definitive way to where I knew objectively that she was not the person that I remember her as. I think that there's a couple of drivers. Number one, I love the the memories I have of her. Secondarily, I don't know if it wouldn't adversely affect me, because if someone as wonderful and nice and as caring as she was could carry out those type of horrific acts, how it would jade me to the rest of humanity. And I don't want to become that person. So I really think that I might, in fact, I think I probably would actively avoid that folder. I wouldn't open it up and I wouldn't look inside, just because I don't want to ruin the fantasy of my grandmother and the way it affects me. And from having discussions like this with Mathew in private and just playing with these things in my mind, I really think people would be hard pressed to say that they are willing to investigate every possible scenario in their life, just because knowing the truth is better than not. Because at this point, I got to tell you, I think there are times where possibly the fantasy may help us more than the blatant hard facts might. So that's kind of where I'm at. Mathew, expand on where you are in this little search.
Well, first, I'd like to point out that this is not just a question we're trying to answer for non-believers, it's for believers too. Everyone should be on the same page for what they're willing to know, what they're willing to learn. And if someone is refusing to learn something or refusing to think something because of how it will negatively affect how they see reality, the things that the core beliefs that they build everything they understand about reality around, if they are afraid of disturbing those, then that is something that they need to be aware of. Because not being aware of something like that, I think, it can end up biting you. So with you saying that you wouldn't want to know what your grandmother, if she had or had not, because the folder you're talking about it held the answer to whether or not she had done something horrific. It didn't say that she had in fact done something horrific.
Right.
I don't know what it's Schrodinger's cat sort of situation.
Exactly. I mean, and I probably set that up wrong, saying that I think the way I phrased it. Okay. Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
I understood. You were just explaining that you wouldn't want to open it to find out what the truth of the situation was. There are, I think, I can't say everyone. That's sort of where I'm on the fence with this. I can't say everyone would have some things that they don't want to know the answer to. I think that most people have things they don't want to know the answers to, the true answer to. Like, not just what they tell themselves is justified, but assuming, as I do, that there is an objective fact to reality, that there would be something in it that they would not want to know, independently of just what they tell themselves is true. So I guess where I stand right now, at least here at the beginning of this discussion, is that most, if not all people, have some propositions that they don't want to know the fact of, such as the moment they're going to die. I think that it's safe to say everyone has some things they don't want to know the truth of. So that may not be the case for absolutely everyone, but I think it's enough of the population for this to be something serious and impactful for people to think about.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, I mean, well, so over the last few months, it's kind of been something we've been playing with, and it's been interesting and fun. And now, since it has been that interesting, we figured, well, maybe it'll be interesting to other people. So that's why we put it out here today. I mean, I guess the kind of rolling it in back to make it more real for us and not just some, abstract kind of thought process. I mean, what I've got to ask myself, and what I have been lately, is let's say that some of the things that we don't want to know are on the subconscious level. Like with my grandmother, I know from a conscious level, I like the way I remember her. I don't need any more information to make me love her anymore or think any more highly of her if if all the information contained in that folder was favorable, and vice versa. I really don't want to erode that memory and have negative connotations assigned to her. So there's no desire there. There's no goal that would drive me to open that folder. And I think that's kind of where, at least in my pursuit of this, that's where I start is, and I think this stems back to, my training and what I do for a living and whatever. I mean, there's a bunch of laws of learning that we go through as far as flight instructors and whatever. But, one of the main things is motivation is huge. If you don't want to, if for whatever reason, conscious or subconscious, you don't want to learn something, you're not going to. It's that simple. You have to have an honest desire to want to know whatever it is you're seeking. And I guess the driver behind that is figure out what is the goal. Why do I want to know this? Why do I want to know if it's true or not? So getting back to myself, why do I want to know, is there a God or not? Why do I play with this so much if there's something blocking me to the point of non-acceptance, regardless of what facts are presented in front of me? And at least on a conscious level, I haven't been able to discern that. I haven't been able to figure out why it would benefit me to not, quote unquote, accept God if the evidence was provided in a way that made sense. So that's kind of how it runs full circle back into this channel and what me and Matthew do, at least on YouTube, in these channels, to kind of investigate the claims when it comes to atheism and theism in general. Matthew, you want to expand on any of that, or go?
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. I think the dynamic that comes to mind when you're talking about your grandmother is whether or not it is an idle question. If the only thing that's going to be affected, the only motivation you have for opening the folder is curiosity, and potentially having how you think of her be affected negatively or positively if you open it. See, that if that's the only dynamic, that's not that huge of a consequence. It's just your state of mind, your understanding of your grandmother. But what if there is something that is much more impactful to be found out? So, a crime that needs to be solved, or someone else's welfare is involved, then whether or not you would want to find out is going to change, most likely. There would be some variables there where you would want to know. So why this is important is, I'm sure every non-believer out there that has had numerous conversations with believers has heard talking points, apologetics about how we don't want to know based on what the Bible says, and we prefer our sin, and we don't want to acknowledge that there is a higher power who we have to answer to. This is what we're really talking about here. What's the ultimate result of finding out what we say? Like if we did find out that there is a God, if we did find out that the Bible is true, what would actually be the consequence of that? And that's why I find it so hilarious when I'm accused of not wanting the Bible to be true. You know what? If there was an omnipotent, benevolent dictator that ran everything, I would have no problem with that. It just doesn't match up to what I understand about reality as it is. That's my objection to it. It doesn't look like there is a benevolent dictator over answer to, I have no problem with it. I do have a problem with this benevolent dictator who is actually only benevolent by calling himself benevolent, by expecting other people to repeat that he's benevolent when he's actually not. So if there is a dictator that we have to answer to, that we can see, yes, clearly this ruler has everyone's best interest in mind, well, I have no problem with that. So that's why it's so funny to me to have accusations levied of, oh, you don't really want to know the truth because you want to live in sin. That's just the Bible talking, yes, but that is also the point where someone stops listening to what you're actually saying. So what we're trying to figure out here is, what do we actually want to know the truth to, and what do we not want to know the truth to? And I can think of a few things that I don't want to know. I don't want to know the exact moment of my death. It would be nice to have a general idea, but as far as like knowing on this day, at this minute, I'm going to die, I don't want to know that. So, can you give a couple of examples of things that you absolutely are sure that you do not want to know the answer to?
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, I definitely don't want to know if there are negative things that my grandmother did, which I'm sure there are at least, minor things that she did. I'm sure she ran red light from time to time, and every things that we all do. And I know she lied. I know, she's not perfect. She's not the second coming of Christ. That was supposed to be funny, by the way, but anyway. But at the same time, I mean, like you mentioned earlier, would I want to know if my wife is cheating? I mean, that's a tough question, because gut reaction, you're right. It's like, yeah, I want to know, because, and then I ask myself, why do I want to know? And then I'm like, I don't know why I would want to know. I really don't, because it would completely shatter my family. I mean, I know I couldn't stay married to her. I know I couldn't respect her in the way that I do now. It would be completely, I mean, just, it would shatter my life. There's no doubt. So again, when I'm faced with that hard fact, I've got that folder laying in front of me, and they say it's going to show that definitively she's never cheated, or she's been cheating since the day you guys were together, whatever. Open it if you want to. Again, when I open it, I don't know. The future of my kids, like you were saying, if my kids are going to die before I do, and especially if they're going to be, I don't know, something horrific, and let's make sure we, put some constraints on that to the point where I cannot intercede. I couldn't change anything. It's just going to be some arbitrary deal that, your son and daughter are going to die X way, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I don't think I'd want to know that either. I mean, I would be in pain every day thinking about when that day is coming, going to come. Like you said about dying. I don't know. I mean, I'm on the fence on that one, because in a lot of ways I'd like to know, because I think it would motivate me on days like yesterday when I kind of sat around other than work and didn't do anything. I mean, I came home, screwed around, didn't do a damn thing. Whereas if I knew that I was dying next Thursday, I'd probably get off my ass and go do something fun so I could live my life a little bit, have a little bit more experience, do something I've always wanted to do or whatever. So I'm on the fence back and forth on that one. But yeah, I mean, but like you, if God exists, I want to know. And to be honest, I want to know either way. If it is the God that some people preach, that is completely benevolent, and all you have to do is believe, and eternity is going to be wonderful, and streets of gold and all of that, or it is the converse, to where this is a fire and brimstone God, and you will be on your knees for all eternity, preaching or praising his name in heaven. And all of this we're nothing more than tools to his, to accomplish his tasks. And or let's even go worse than that. Let's say that, the Bible basically sugarcoats what God really is, and he's not benevolent at all. He is malicious, and created us for nothing more than sadistic and a plaything to torture and make whatever for eternity. There is no heaven per se. All of us will go to hell. Would I want to know that? For some reason, yes. And I don't know why I would want to know that, but not want to know the day of my death. It seems kind of counterintuitive when I think about it, but I can't explain the curiosity in me to know what the end game is, so to speak, is strong. It definitely draws me in all the time. And I think that's why I've done this for the last 20 years, because the atheist position, the agnostic position, is a position just like in science, where there's never a final answer. Every answer you get is always going to lead to another question, which, to be honest, in a lot of ways is fun. I really enjoy that aspect of it. But if there is a 2 + 2 is 4 type answer out there, I think that's what we're all seeking. At least I am, when it comes to this and most of the questions I have about life and things in general. So the question I think that I would like to see more often, at least from an internal perspective, is people just reflect and say, why would I not want to know this? And before a Christian or an atheist, because we do the same thing. I mean, I'll be honest, I do it either. If I haven't done it publicly, I guarantee you I've done it in my head, said, whoever I'm talking to, this person does not want to know, and it's absolutely pointless to even try to get this across to them, because it doesn't matter. They're not going to listen to this, because their goal is not to understand reality. Their goal is to, like me, with my grandmother, protect their perception of this being that they feel they have a relationship with. They do not want to sacrifice that relationship. Okay, that's understandable.
All right.
So go ahead.
So if you have some questions like you're having to do with your grandmother, where you wouldn't want to know the answer to, how would you explain that there would be a question like a God existing, not just a God, but say the biblical version? How would you explain that you do want to know that answer to that question, where there's eternal damnation involved, as opposed to your grandmother?
For me, the difference is that my perception of my grandmother, especially now that she's dead, affects no one except myself. I mean, she was nobody. She's like me. No one really knew her. She was, lived her life. It was a really, in my opinion, it was a good life. She had, some really good things and brought up a lot of really good people. But effectively, she's not anyone famous. She's not influential. There's no one out there that's studying her works, that are being influenced and following her examples, other than her, her offspring. But God, on the other hand, real or not, does affect society, does affect a large segment of the populace. And in my opinion, if it's not real, it goes along. There's a lot of negative that can be associated with that. Now, again, I'm not going to sit here and play the game that it's all negative. Again, I don't believe in what Hitchens said, is that, religion poisons everything. There are some good aspects to religion, at least as far as I'm concerned. But when my beliefs transcend just affecting me and starts to affect other people, I feel now it's my duty to go out and try to figure out what reality is, especially when I'm raising kids. Because, I mean, think about it. If Christianity is right, if you, like you said, with the biblical version of the Bible, my kids get to be 15, 16, 17 years old, which my daughter's getting really close now. And I mean, we've already had this conversation. I mean, she was on last year sometime. And I do get into the conversation with her and somehow convince her that I'm right and move her away from even her deism, which she is now, into a completely agnostic or atheistic position, and there ends up being a God, effectively I'm the cause, or in a lot of ways would be the cause of her damnation. I don't want that to happen. I don't want to harm my kids. And by extension, I don't want to harm society. So does that make sense why I guess my main driver and why I would want to know on that end?
Yeah, I think so. You've answered it for me. The problem comes down to the consequences of your actions, not so much the state of your mind. If choosing to, I mean, wholly aside from presuppositionalism and their claims that we already know the Bible is true, which I would be happy to just say across the board are complete BS. Aside from that, if it is still in question, which I believe it is, there are consequences to it. There are consequences to us. We have the ears of other people, not on a necklace around our necks, but listening to some of the things that we say. And what you say and what you promote is going to affect other people's lives as well. So we don't want to be lying. We don't want to be misleading people. And then there's our own, quote unquote, soul destination. So there are consequences to this choice that are massive if it's true. So that I think that in a sort of pragmatic sense, that is what drives me to want to know. And aside from the fact that I consider religion to be incredibly interesting, it's just like another art form. The ideas that people come up with, the way that they reality with all of these angels and demons and prophecy, I think it's very cool because I'm a fan of fantasy, and I think that overlaying that on reality is very interesting. It can be very disingenuous, but at any rate, that's one of the main reasons that I pay attention to what believers say.
And I think that the converse is true also, though. I mean, I think that, and this is where it becomes problematic for me, because I tend to fall into that camp sometimes, like I just admitted, that, when I'm speaking with certain people, I'll almost write them off as a lost cause, because it seems to me that no matter what they're presented with, I mean, when people like Ken Ham, says, if the Bible said 2 + 2 is 5, I would believe it and question mathematics. I mean, if your devotion to that book being completely inerrant is to that level, I am going to start definitely questioning your motivation. And again, I honestly believe that there are people out there that need to believe that for multiple reasons. And I mean, not the least of which could be self-preservation. Without it, they would see no reason to go on living or anything else. However, that belief, if kept internal, good on you. Have great. Have it, do what you want to. That's great. But the second that you go outside that and you start to try to motivate others to make life decisions based off of that, that's where I think that it's not fair for you to, on one hand, demand other people to listen to you, while at the same time putting up walls and saying, I'm not going to listen to a word you say because you're full of it. And again, this goes both ways. There's plenty of atheists out there that they hear the name of, Ken Ham. When I say Kent, I'm thinking Kent Hovind and Ken Ham, and conflating the two. But anyway, or Ken Hovind, and just go, he's a nut. He can't think. I'm not going to listen to what he says. I mean, in my opinion, as humans, we need to, number one, if we're going to try to affect the minds of others and try to get people to think in a way that we feel is correct, we need to do everything in our power to make sure that what we're doing is fair. In other words, if I want you to listen to me, I better damn well listen to you. And it is open, and it is giving them every benefit of the doubt and try to make it as plausible as possible and see what happens from there. Now, again, I hate prescribing things to other people because I know I could be wrong on this, but that's how I feel. I mean, and again, I might be wrong, but
well, as far as Ken Ham is concerned, there's two issues there. I'm very confident that he would not want to know that the Bible wasn't true.
And that's exactly, yeah.
Do everything in his power to keep that from ever sinking in. And the other thing is that he and those who think like he does in terms of young earth creationism, literal Bible, anyway, just cast that net as wide as it'll go. They believe that they are speaking from authority. They believe that the Bible is authority for them, so they can appeal to authority of God. And that gives them the right to enforce that authority through the Bible. So it's not just a matter of, I believe this and you believe that. Okay, we're, yin and yang on what's the case. They believe that they have an authority backing them up that we don't. Well, depending on who you ask, we can have the devil backing us up. But my point is, he would do everything he could, I'm certain. Ken Ham and most, if not all, young earth creationists would do everything in their power to keep from even allowing the possibility that they're wrong about the Bible in the exact same way that I was talking about not wanting to know my own death, and you were talking about not wanting to know about whether or not your grandmother did X. They would preserve that belief above anything else in reality, and the question really ends up being, what is the line for where it's okay to do that and where it's not? To deceive ourselves.
Well, and again, the self-deception, I don't really have a problem with. I mean, at least to a certain degree. Well, not to any degree, as long as that self-deception doesn't manifest in a way that is going to affect others. So as long as, if Kent Hovind, Ken Ham, all these, whoever out there wants to believe in that way, again, good on them. That's fine. When you cross that line and start to try to convince others that you have what's true and you're going to, mandate that they believe the same way you do, either, through whatever means you want to, that's where the line is. And again, I know I do that. I absolutely am part of the group that is out there evangelizing, preaching, if you will, for non-belief. And therefore, at least in my opinion, the only fair way to do that is to remain open enough and be honest with myself enough that I'm, at least from a conscious standpoint, going to try to find the truth, regardless what it is, even if it's completely contrary to what I believe today, before I walk out and start saying, look, guys, I think I've got some pretty good reasons for believing the way I am, and I've got some hopefully even better reasons to try to convince you to think the same way. But that's where I'm saying the line needs to be drawn, because like you said, I completely agree that the people that we were talking about, they will not allow themselves to even play with the possibility that God doesn't exist, because by doing so, they feel like they're blaspheming. They feel like that they're already sinning square one. And it's just not, I keep saying fair, and I feel like that's kind of, I don't think that's the right descriptor, but I think people understand what I mean is that if you're going to put yourself out there, you need to be honest. You need to say, look, I've looked at both sides and here are the reasons why, and not play these, for lack of a better term, little semantic games of, I win, you win. It's not about that. It's about, here are the reasons I believe, show me why I'm wrong. Here are the reasons you believe, I think they're wrong because of X. Let's come together, see at least what middle ground we have, and build off of that and try to figure out which one of us is closer to truth in an honest way. Both of us are probably not completely right. Which one's closer? That's the game. That's what we should be trying to do, at least in my opinion. And the first step to that is the motivation behind it. And honestly, assessing yourself to the point to where do I want to know this? And if I don't want to know this, then why in the hell am I even talking to people? Because it's pointless. All I'm going to do is sit here and just...
The quiet atheist just asked a question in the comment section.
Oh, wow.
How is it moral to believe, this is in response to what you said earlier, how is it moral to believe that 2 + 2 = 5, and why should we let that particular belief flourish? I'll take a crack at that, and then I'd like to hear what you think.
Okay, cool.
I think that we can't not let it flourish. We can't not let it flourish because ideas, we have a right to speak our ideas. We have, no matter how wrong we are, the communication of ideas, the free thought, is everything to the foundation of our culture. Now, there are obviously going to be restraints on what actually ends up being able to be said. You can Bradley Manning and Julian Assange, that they are well aware of the danger of actually speaking your mind and telling what you know. But for the most part, we live in a very open discourse online. And that has to be preserved and widened, if possible, so that people can say things that are ridiculous. People can say things that are wrong. And in saying them, be shown to be false. So we should absolutely it is immoral to let someone say 2 + 2 = 5, or the earth is flat, or evolution is false, or, the earth is only 7 days, or 4,000 years old, or 6,000 years old. Absolutely, we should let people say that. It just should never be accepted as truth as opposed to reality itself by not being challenged. You have to have both.
Yeah, I think that sums it up great. The only thing that I would add that is also the utility behind understanding why 2 + 2 is 4. Not only is it, from a conceptual standpoint, kind of enlightening and helps critical thought, and each individual be able to think better, to actually rationalize, but there's utility in addition. We can use it for things. Not to mention, from that, we can get subtraction, which from there we can go to multiplication and on and on and on through the functions, all the way up through calculus and anything else, which now we end up a world like we have now. So having thoughts not only be able to be freely distributed, which that's, in my opinion, what the internet should be for, but at the same time be vetted in a way that is open and honest, not as the presuppositionalists would have us close the mouths of the obstreperous just because they don't want to hear it, and it goes against them from a sin standpoint. Regardless what we're saying is true or not, it doesn't matter. To them, it's shut us up. On the other hand, we as atheists, I don't think it's fair to shout down even the worst of the Christians. It should be, I think, openly challenged. And if we do have Westboro Baptist Church people, please bring them out. The ignorance, the hate, the dishonesty, just and the horrific things they say will speak volumes. I don't even think you have to challenge that other than say, what do you believe? Great. Tell me about that. Okay. Now demonstrate why it's true. And when all you have is this book says it's true. Okay, well, Spider-Man pretty definitively shows that Peter Parker lives in New York City, a known city. He has appeared multiple times with many very prominent and famous historical figures. We can look in the phone book and find multiple Peter Parkers living in New York City. So therefore, using that same reasoning, using that same inference, Spider-Man's real. Again, that's all that need to be done at that point with those type of radical individuals. But to completely ignore what they're saying and move to a position of ridicule and belittlement, I think undermines everybody from both sides. As much as the Westboro Baptist Church undermines their position by trying to play those games, I think that some of the more aggressive atheists tend to do the same thing. In that, go ahead.
I think that there is definite virtue to some ridicule, and I would even go so far as to say being disrespectful, being hateful. I mean, well, obviously, freedom of speech goes both ways. You can be hateful, but there might be consequences to that. But denigrating someone for their opinion is all part and parcel of freedom of speech and freedom of thought. Well, I wouldn't recommend it, but I don't see any reason to stop someone who is openly and unabashedly disrespectful in the way they talk to someone because of their opinion. I would try to suggest there are better ways to do it, but I've heard a lot of believers say that one of the things that drove them, I don't know, a lot of non-believers say that one of the things that drove them to look at the justification for what they believed already and eventually became atheists because of the disrespectful way they were talked to by atheists. It made them go look up in a way that nothing else would why they believed what they believed. And so I mean, there is utility in being rude, and I won't go so far as to say being hateful. I don't think that that serves anyone.
Let me kind of clarify what I mean by that. I mean, in the same way that the Westboro Baptist Church, if you walked up and you said, "Hey, look, let's have a conversation," they are not going to enter into any type of conversation other than to say, let's say that someone walked up and said, "Look, I'm gay. Let's discuss this so we can understand where we're both coming from." Their reaction to that would be, "Is you're a sinner, you're going to hell. Repent. I'm not going to talk to you." Presuppositionalist. Okay, 90% of what you say is based on Scripture. You say that the Scripture is where you get. Let's talk about Scripture. I don't discuss Scripture with non-believers. If in that same way, if we have atheists out there that say, "Look, you're a presuppositionalist. I don't talk to presuppositionalists, and here are why you're laughable. You're da-da-da," and just ridicule. You're stupid. You're da-da-da-da. Whatever. In the same fashion that, let's say, a lot of presuppositionalists do, and Westboro Baptist Church does. That's the degree that I'm talking about. As far as the kind of ridicule back and forth, you're absolutely right. Because don't get me wrong, there's times that when one of my beliefs gets ridiculed, it fires me up. And you're right. I go research it to see if I can defend that point. And that's great. I mean, one of the things that I love about what I've run into on the internet is what happened when I started having honest conversations with Bible Thumping Wingnut back in the day when I was on the Bible study that he had. And, a couple of things were, number one, he said, just this, you don't want to know what's true. So that got me to actually start really thinking about that and trying to be able to defend, look, I do, here are examples of it. And I just lost my train of thought on the other one that I was going to make the point on more than anything. I hate it when I do that.
You just brought us back to the main point of this hangout, which is that there are some things that we don't want to know, but that doesn't mean that that's cover or justification for saying we don't want the Bible to be true, that we don't want there to be a hell, but that we don't want there to be some sort of a dictator that we have to answer to, and there's no escape of it. There are, in most cases, going to be that's going to be the route that believers will take with you, and that in a way it's how they justify that their reasoning, quote unquote, doesn't get through to you, but it's also a way to shame you. So that, honestly,
that just reminded
presuppositionalists. I love like the contentiousness, the everything. I love their entire shtick.
Oh, I do too, and that's why a lot of my
me to evaluate my beliefs so much and realize that the precepts are wrong.
Well, and that brings
just because they were so confident about it.
Right, and that's what brought me back to, or that reminded me of what I said, is that I'm stuck with this label on that side of the fence that I'm so ridiculous that I don't even know my wife exists, but I'll claim to love her. I love that. They think that is the be all, end all. Ned is a nut. Look at how crazy. Now, I think Bible Thumping Wingnut even put up a deal, making me Atheist of the Year or third place or something because of that, which was flattering because that shows, at least in my opinion, how open I am to any possibility and actually vetting everything I believe, including the existence of this planet, of this world, of my wife. Whereas getting back to the ridicule, getting into it to the point where you tend to, I don't know how to explain it other than hide the fact that you don't want to have these questions and you would rather belittle, denigrate, and just not converse at all. I think it sets everybody back on both sides of the fence. But again, let me be clear. As much ridicule as I've taken over this, especially that saying that I don't know my wife is real, or not capital K know my wife is real, there is huge utility in I almost look at that as not ridicule and not as and I guess it's intent. I don't look at that as malicious. I look at that as poking fun at and kind of just, guys jab at each other and screw with each other all the time. And it's almost playful banter. We're back and forth going, really? You don't believe that? Da, da, da. Which makes me think. I love that part of it. But to take it to the next level and cut people off to the point where, okay, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm not going to talk to you anymore. That's where the line starts to be drawn, in that I think that can be misconstrued as, instead of confidence, as being afraid. I'm not willing to go down that street because I know that person has a point at the end that I can't address from a reasonable, rational standpoint. And therefore I ridicule, therefore I ad hom. I'm going to go down that road because I can deflect away from it.
Well,
go ahead.
Let's go back to something that, just to sort of tie this off, there's something that you've admitted you wouldn't want to know, which is if someone laid a manila envelope in front of you, and there was something about your grandmother in there that you may or may not want to know,
right?
Depending on how horrible it was because of how you feel about your grandmother. And for me, wanting not to not know the moment of my death, whenever that will be, if someone would, could magically tell me when I was going to die. Let's focus on what is keeping us from wanting to know those things. And let's try to articulate why that's different than wanting to know if the Bible is true or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, it's purely comfort. I mean, I'll be the first one to admit. I mean, I have a big belief in that people do things for one of two reasons, either to receive pleasure or avoid pain. And I kind of look at it as I'm running a cost-benefit analysis of that folder laying there. I open it up and it says something wonderful about my grandmother. How much pleasure am I going to get from that? I mean, it might make me feel a little bit more happy and know that she did, whatever for whoever. But the potential downside is so much more painful than the pleasure that I would get. It's not worth it. So I guess that would be my motivation, or motivation to not open the folder. Tying that back to the Bible, again, trying to run this through that filter and say, if someone could bring me an envelope and say, inside this envelope is definitive proof that God, whichever God, absolutely exists or absolutely does not exist. And once you open that folder, you will know. There's no way around it anymore. You will capital K objectively know one way or another. I would jump at the chance to open that folder. Because I don't see the downside. I honestly don't feel that if I came to believe that God existed, that, number one, the actions I take on a daily basis would change at all, other than maybe going to church here and there and tithing 10% to the church instead of giving, to charity or my secular charities like Doctors Without Borders and things like that. But I think in a lot of ways it would make me more comfortable. The pleasure I would get from knowing when I die, I am not basically leaving the party anymore. The party's just moving to a different place. So I don't miss out. I get to see where my kids end up, and we all end up together, hopefully, at the end. So that's what I'm saying is I can't, from a rational standpoint, understand why I wouldn't open that folder. What about you?
The reason that I don't want to know when I'm going to die is because time is short enough already, and I deal with severe anxiety, and I just don't need to add to that. I take 2 different medications for that, and I take 6 total for related problems that you're aware of that I'm not going to go into. So it's a matter of how I'm going to live the rest of my life in a more agitated state or a less agitated state. But when it comes to knowing whether or not the Bible is true, beyond any possible doubt or any question at all, ever, if someone could lay that information in front of me, I would jump at it. And the reason I would jump at it is because the upside and the downside are so massive that there isn't really any downside.
Yeah, I mean, I think
the downside itself, finding out about the upside, negates the downside, because finding out that just worshiping and praising God, if you found that out that there actually was a God, you would be so overjoyed that much joy and pleasure could be experienced for all of eternity, that nothing else would matter. You would jump at the chance to do that. But there would be no reason to go to hell unless you were not chosen as one of the elect, and God was predestining you to go there. But that's a topic for another day. But that envelope, it's also holding the truth that there is no God, and not just no God at all, but just the Bible. We're just talking about the biblical God here. So that theistic, the personal deity is not true. Now, that would be the other side of it. And that wouldn't have that big of an impact on me, because that's the way I live my life now anyway. So it would just be a win-win, really. Because if I were able to find out that God was true, the Bible was a completely historical document, that would mean that I would get to, that's really the irony of it, is if it were actually true, I would want it to be true. So that would be a win-win for me. There is no downside. The only problem would be if I opened the envelope and the envelope said, there is a God, but it's too late for you, you're going to hell. That would suck.
Well, but again, I can still see an upside to that, because at that point, at least we wouldn't have to condemn our children to the same fate. You see what I'm saying? At least from that utility, I could go, okay, I screwed up. You're right. And probably, especially if you go along some people's beliefs, we deserve it, whatever. But the point that I'm saying is perhaps by understanding that, now I could avoid my children falling into that same trap that without that knowledge, I may have almost predestined them for, just by my attitude, and them in some ways, I guess, emulating me if they, hopefully they won't emulate too much for me, but whatever. And I think that's kind of one thing that's always, ever since Oral Roberts, because I got that same pushback there, in that, look, you're just being belligerent, and you just don't want to know. You want to continue to sin. You want to continue to live your life the way you want to. And I've never understood that, I guess, that rationalization from the other side, because just as you put it, the downsides are not enough downside to not want to know. It's not negative enough to where you would avoid it. And what I would be curious to see is, especially any other atheists that happen to watch this in the future, if God was real, is there enough downside that you would choose, if given that chance, to not open the folder? And then conversely, from the Christian side, if there was a folder in front of you that specifically said, look, this will tell you if God is real or not. And be aware, it's a 50-50 proposition. All of your belief, all of your desire has nothing to do with the objective reality that's contained within this folder. Would you open that folder? And if so, why? If not, why? That's kind of where I'm at, as far as not understanding how that objection ever comes up.
I think that has to do with the not understanding part, is that the misunderstanding is on their end. They are reading the Bible thinking that we non-believers care so much about our own egos and our own sin that nothing in all of the glory of the afterlife and God's beautiful nature and everything, none of that can match up to the hardness of our own hearts. And that's just so ridiculous, it's not even funny. But they have to read the Bible and go with what it says, no matter how ridiculous. So if the Bible is leading them to believe that we are not swayed by how wonderful God is supposed to be, in favor of being our own God, that's I don't think we can actually get through to them on that, because it's so fantastically ridiculous to me that we could care more about our own earthly sin than about the magnificence of God. Whatever, if you say so.
Well, but it goes farther than that, because I would assume that the believers, in the same way that I look at it, as how my beliefs, especially when I do what I do and make my beliefs known and actively argue against the counter belief, I don't see how you can believe that someone like me, someone like you, someone like, I would say, most people that are online arguing either side of the, the great debate, so to speak, would not care, not only for themselves. Maybe we are that selfish that we don't want to give up our sins, but knowing that we have children, knowing that our actions are going to affect others, and potentially our actions are going to have not only catastrophic results if we are leading people astray, but those results are eternal. So the pain that we would be causing just in this life of missing out on the beauty that God shows while we're living is nothing in comparison to the infinite pain that we'd be causing, I would assume, our own loved ones and everyone else around us, that we could be that hard-hearted and care so little for anyone else. Like you said, seems ridiculous when you put it in that context. I know of very few people outside the Dahmers and that type of people that would want to act in that horrific of a way.
Well, how close are we coming up to an hour? Are we there yet?
Let me check the deal. I'm not even sure. I haven't been keeping track of it at all. Yeah, we're actually, God, you're really good, man. We're 1 hour and 1 minute, I think, right at that.
All right, well, let's get final thoughts and close this off and keep it nice and short. What do you say?
Sounds good to me.
I think we've covered a lot of good ground.
Okay. I'll let you go first since I went first on the opening.
Yeah, fair enough. So, yes, there are things that we both, and presumably most everyone, if not everyone, don't want to know are true. But it's a question that has to be weighed against the consequences, against how it would change you, and when it comes to some of the more important issues in life that we don't normally have access to, like someone who's told that they have 6 months to live and they have cancer, they actually have an idea of how long they're going to be able to live, roughly, but most of us don't know when we're going to die, and there's not really any upside to knowing when you're going to die, unless, 5 minutes from now, then it's a definite upside. You should get out of the way of the oncoming train. But that's a completely different issue than wanting to know whether or not the Bible is true or the Quran is true. Because the upside, the consequences of learning that the Bible is actually true would be so magnificent that you couldn't, how could you pass that up? That the only way that you could want to pass that up is if you were, destined to pass it up by circumstances out of your control or by your own stupidity. So my point is, the fact that there are things that we admit we don't want to know the truth of, that I think is just a very reasonably considered fact of reality. I don't want to know how many rocks there are on Earth. I don't want to know how many grains of sand. I have no interest in finding that out. It doesn't help me one bit. So from a pragmatic sort of perspective, yeah, there are some things that I'm not ever really going to care about the answer to. So I don't want to know. But that doesn't mean that that comes before Christianity. That comes before Islam. And I think that that's where the real usefulness of figuring out what's true comes in. Because there is a pragmatic end to it. And it's kind of foolish to deny that. And when it comes to potentially the greatest joy, the greatest existence that we could possibly have, that's the biggest carrot that someone can hang in front of our faces. And that's why, to me, the argument fails that, oh, well, you just want your sin, you just want to be your own God. That's how badly it fails. You're undercutting the magnificence, supposed magnificence, of this other being that you're trying to sell me on. So that's really all I have to say.
I just realized, man, you took Pascal's wager and kind of turned it on its head, in that it's not about believing because of the fear of what would happen if you don't believe. It's believing because, or not so much believing, but wanting to believe because of the positive nature of it. So, I mean, I think that's a great tool. I think that the next time that I get confronted with that anyway, I'm going to do that. I'm going to follow suit what you just said there is, look, let's look at it from a Pascal's wager perspective. Why would I not want to know this is true? The payoff is so great. The problem is I can't believe something that I haven't been presented with evidence, or at least enough compelling evidence to make it more probable than not. And as far as, my kind of closing statement, I'll keep it pretty short, in that the main reason that I kind of wanted to do this was just for anybody that sees this, and I'm sure I'll get almost no views because I'm not that big, but anybody that happens to fall across this, between our channels, maybe we'll get a few thousand, maybe. But I would just ask that self-reflect. Ask yourself before you get out there and start preaching, because we both do, from the atheist side and the theistic side. We're going to preach. I mean, that's part of what we do. Before we start to hammer the opposition, really try to take a self-inventory on, do I want to know about the opposition? Can I handle the truth if it is in direct opposition to what I believe? And if you come to the realization that, you know what, I do not want to know this is real, I think it's almost unfair of you to continue to try to preach or to try to, proselytize for either side. You're not being honest with your viewers. You're not being honest with the world in general by saying, I know this is wrong. And then someone tells you, well, what about this? And you're effectively putting your fingers in your ears and saying, no, I don't want to hear. Ask yourself, can you handle the truth? So with that, I'll sign off, and everybody that watched, thanks. We haven't been on here in a while, and I'm surprised we got anybody watching. And I think, Matthew, we had like 10 or 15 people watching from time to time. So that's amazing to me. Thanks, guys, that people are out there watching us this much, even after all of our neglect of you. So with that, everybody, good night. Matthew, do you want to say anything else?
No, thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll do this or something similar again sometime soon.
Absolutely, man. All right. Good night, everybody.